Okay, welcome to the JDC West 2022 International Business Case Presentation. Thank you to our judges, Bridget Lazarco, Ted Morehouse, Amanda Bjornson, Brian Gilchrist, and Roderick McIntosh. Competitors, you will have a maximum of 20 minutes to present. Immediately following the presentation, judges will have a total of 5 minutes to ask questions. Competitors, you will see Zoom chat notifications at various intervals to indicate the remaining time. Any speaker who continues to speak after the maximum time limit will be stopped. No questions or comments will be permitted from the audience. All judges are asked to have their microphones muted during the presentation. The audience is banned from any material or naming convention that bears the name or symbol of a competing university. We ask that the audience leave the Zoom call immediately following the presentation. Judges, please stay on this call until I advise you to move to the next one. Competitors, you may begin your presentation now.
Unstoppable in their path, tectonic plates have the same dynamic and unpredictable nature as our own human communities. To flow with their movements is seamless, pushing against it is futile. Hi, my name is Zach, and these are my colleagues, Anna and Alex from A to Z Consulting. And today we would like to talk to you about how, when we analyze the international communities present across the globe, we can see that architectonics must shift their focus from one plate to another using the human advantage to improve your situation by tectonic proportions. We will first begin by addressing the problem of how can architectonics navigate through differences in culture and business practice to secure a contract for 2022 that provides the most profitable and trouble-free entrance into the international architectural market. We will utilize 3 criteria of a good cultural fit, alignment with architectonic's core values, and the potential to open up further markets within the international realm. Our solution we propose to penetrate international markets through innovative green space projects within the Netherlands. And we will assess this through 3 impacts. Firstly, maintaining less time spent mitigating cultural issues, keeping that competitive edge and good reputation, and lastly, maintaining a presence within the European market.
So hopping right into a cultural analysis, we used a mapping tool to essentially take a look at 3 key countries of interest, that being the Netherlands, Canada, and the Philippines. Furthermore, we have selected 3 key areas of this mapping tool: communication, trusting, and scheduling, that we believe are most applicable to our current business predicament. While we analyze these 3 key areas in the context of our current business predicament, we gain the critical insight of a relationship-based trust in the Philippines is actually quite detrimental to our current business opportunity within that nation. This is through the inability to effectively create a stable relationship with the Philippines without face-to-face interaction. A second key insight we gather is that Northern European countries such as the Netherlands offer a far more optimal cultural business fit. This is seen through the alignment of the communication, scheduling, and once again, trust. The greater alignment in the trust category between these 2 countries allows us to mitigate the issue of having to create a relationship based on face-to-face interaction. We can mitigate this problem by having a more task-based relationship building that we believe would be very beneficial to our company given this current predicament with COVID.
Moving into your SOAR analysis, I will do a quickly overview of the main points of each category within this analysis. So first, your main strength is your diversity. Your company has over a dozen ethnicities as employees currently. That allowed you to do a co-creation of the inner company culture. Also, we noticed that you have over 50% of your employees from different parts of Europe. That is your human advantage. that showcase that your company has a really well and throughout understanding of how to do business in the European location. Moving into the opportunities, we know that you currently have your eye on the Manila project in the Philippines, and that is an awesome, a great opportunity. But we want to bring to your attention the opportunity in the European architectural services market that has been growing with a market growth of 4.6% compounded annual growth rate from last year until 2027. In addition, we have the European Union Green Deal that was signed last year that estimates that over 35 million buildings could be renovated by 2030. And moving into your main aspiration currently, that is to have one international project per year starting in 2022 in order to maintain your competitive advantage. And also, in addition, being able to move forward from this post-pandemic environment in an inclusive way regarding the current vaccinations and traveling ethical issues that you were presented today. And the main result that you want to see in the future is to penetrate a new market internationally while having an increased potential to open new markets in the future for the long term. Which brings us to the critical insight that architectonics needs to expand internationally in order to maintain a competitive advantage and open new market opportunities in the long term. And also your company's human advantage makes Europe a very strong candidate for an international expansion.
A safe and predictable business atmosphere that upholds the values that architectonics has, paired with a strong demand for these services that you offer, is that ideal location of Europe and the contracts that it may have. When we utilize a pestle analysis, we can see that high levels of political stability throughout democratic systems, efficient and fair bureaucracy make Europe the most desirable world region. And this is solidified when we take into consideration the large and vibrant economies that all have similar legal systems within the European Union. This, unlike comparable regions such as Australia and its neighbors. With all technology required to foster innovative buildings present and environmental conditions which are in line with the Canadian climate, we must highlight Northern Europe specifically, recognizing that it is secure, lucrative, and familiar for the setting for architectonics.
As we jump into alternatives, we can look at our first alternative of continuing the fight for the Manila bid. As seen through the cultural analysis, this inexistence of a cultural fit is a very, very tough uphill battle that is very hard to mitigate in the short term. This is why we believe that this isn't a viable option for penetrating a new international market, especially in the next year. As we take a look at the second alternative, to consolidate business in Canada, this has a cultural fit and it's where we are tried and true. It aligns with our core values, but this does not allow us to open new international markets, which we know is of the utmost importance to you right now. This leads us into our third alternative of penetrating the European market, as this allows for a cultural fit, a core value fit, and allows us to move internationally.
Not every country within the European Union and Europe as a whole is necessarily the same. Some showcase more ripe opportunities than others. Due to the scale and length of the projects that architectonics desires to take on, we must assess which economies have the least chance of deviating from a positive growth rate. We also need to look at which cultures have the value and governments that invest in innovative community green spaces and restoration endeavors. And we also need to look to see if they reflect conditions familiar to architectonics' previous work in colder climates. But none of these advantages may truly be leveraged if we do not utilize the most important differentiating factor of all, the human advantage. We can see that with some of your team originating from Ireland, from Poland, and from the Netherlands, architectonics finds itself deeply connected to 3 states which exemplify all of the aforementioned conditions. After taking into consideration unique attributes held by each of the 3 states, It is seen that there's strong demand set out by the Dutch government and cohesion with that business culture that architectonics has. The other two, on the other hand, both suffer from a lack of opportunity generation, and which is a detriment to their long-term viability. The Netherlands' ambitious goals that is set to reach by 2030 combine both increases in architectural funding and environmental considerations. And for that reason, we recommend penetrating the Dutch market through securing an innovative design bid in one of the country's up-and-coming cities.
As we take a look at the implementation, we've recommended a 4-step process. The first is to exit from the Philippines in a very concise manner, in a very orderly manner. We want to maintain personal relationship with the Manila government, as it can provide future business opportunities in the future, and we've already familiarized themselves as business partners. Moving on to our second phase, we want to secure a contract in the Netherlands and follow that along with facilitating long-term relationships with that partner and within the country as a whole. As far as the fourth phase, we want to develop a model that can replicate this penetration process into other areas of the EU so we can grow our international presence.
In order to have a clean exit from the Philippines, maintain the relationship with the government, we suggest that Andres flies to the Philippines personally, bringing a gift of appreciation and buys dinner before delivery. It is important that Andres is the one to go there because he has been the closest personal connection to the Manila team so far. And as Alex has explained before, the Philippines culture establishes trust based on relationship. Moving into the gift, that gift signifies and represents a node to keep future opportunities open in the future. That is important because the high context communication showcases that when communicating with people from Philippines, you need to have a sophisticated and nuanced communication. And lastly, Andres should take the Manila team to dinner at the Gallery Vasque in order to provide with good night before delivering the news, since that's the custom in that country to discuss business after dinner. In order to secure a contract in the Netherlands, we advise you to first redirect your workforce to secure the Netherlands contract. You should put Daniel in that team because, like mentioned before, he's the crucial element that will give you the advantage of understanding how the Netherlands does business. Next, you should pursue contracts by researching and evaluating bids. And lastly, securing an optimal bid after putting against your company values.
And here for the most exciting part of our whole implementation. We found a potential project in the Tilburg Textile Museum. Through a thorough and in-depth analysis of the Dutch market, we actually found a current open bid for the redevelopment and expansion of the Tilburg Textile Museum and surrounding area in January 2022, which happens to be the exact same time period as your current bid within the Philippines. This area has an open and undeveloped surrounding space, which is great. We can incorporate a vast array of different creative architectural ideas, one of which could be through local expression. Tilburg is well known for its street art and murals. This is something we could incorporate into our designs to really give a well-rounded, in-depth showcasing of the local culture. We also want to have community impact, and this can be done through the incorporation of green space, through a communal garden that's very inclusive, as well as incorporate solar panels that can be integrated into the glass roof, which helps perpetuate the push in this city's quest in terms of green energy. If we secure a bid of this nature, what we want to do is facilitate a long-term relationship with this party in the Netherlands. This will first be done through an internal team analysis of Dutch business practices and norms. This will be co-led by Daniel, who's a Dutch senior budgeter and can provide first-hand insight into this field. We then want to organize an initial online team meeting between Architectonics and the Dutch partner. We will do this through an organized timeline, projected tasks, and joint decision-making strategy, all of which are important to the cultural aspects of Dutch business. Moving on to the third part, we will schedule weekly check-ins throughout the lifetime of the project to demonstrate consistency, accountability, and open team discussion, 3 aspects, again, that are very important to Dutch business. We will conclude the project with a written assessment between parties. Hopefully, a positive assessment will grant international credibility moving forward and help with the next phase of our implementation. Our last major phase of our implementation is to fully develop the EU model. A circular model, we will use preparation, reuse, and insurity to create a perpetuating cycle to penetrate into different areas of the EU. The first stage, prepare, is to prepare a generalized sales package consisting of current portfolio and value proposition that will be acquired as we move throughout more international partners. What we want to do with reuse is to reuse information and acquisition models that we know work. The more we get used to it, the more understanding we have, and the better we can penetrate new markets. The insurity aspect comes in to make sure that we ensure adequate cultural aspects are analyzed and taken into account. When we analyze different European markets at the beginning of this entire analysis, we noticed that there was vast differences sometimes among different countries. And so we must ensure that this is all taken into account at all times.
Moving into the costs and benefits of this implementation. Starting off with the cost from exiting from the Philippines project. That will cost around $2,000, accounting for the airplane flights, the flower gift, and the dinner. Moving into the benefits, you would have a benefit, a net revenue from the Textile Museum project of $8.95 million. And that net revenue, in comparison with the net revenue, the possible net revenue from the Manila project, has an additional revenue of $1.15 million, which you can see is an additional 13% increase in the net revenue.
When we look at the timeline, we can see that this project will take 10 months to complete. With the Philippines exit completed by January, the Netherlands bid will be secured by the end of March. With the project continuing till November, in which then we shift our focus onto our next endeavors.
We'll measure this implementation through 3 main KPIs. First, we want to see a 70% productivity increase due to good cultural fit. That showcases the impact of spending less time mitigating issues that arise from the culture class that now it's not an issue anymore. Next, we want to see 80% of project opportunities in the Netherlands aligning with your core values, because we want to see you maintaining your competitive edge and company reputation by doing work that is relatable to your core values. And lastly, we want to see a 5-star review from evaluation from the Netherlands partner in order to establish that reputation internationally and eventually see a lasting market presence in Europe using the model that Alex mentioned before.
Looking at the risks and mitigation, the foremost risk that is probably most apparent is what happens if we don't secure a Netherlands contract. As mentioned in the analysis of the different alternatives within Europe, Poland and Ireland are both great options as well. And it literally came down to just a pros and cons analysis, while both of these options both fit our criteria. So our mitigation would purely be to pursue contracts in Poland and Ireland. Our second risk would be that the COVID-19 Omicron wave increases a travel ban, impeding international travel to the Netherlands. A mitigation would be temporarily keeping or moving Daniel, who has an EU passport, to stay on site within the Netherlands as needed. He will work through Zoom with employees back in Canada, which is further supported by the task-based cultural analysis.
With the ever-changing conditions of the world causing those tectonic shifts in what is capable and feasible. We must recognize that which stays constant. Our multicultural roots and our deep connections to our places of origin, if utilized, will grant us an advantage, a human advantage, to secure success on whichever continent, whichever tectonic plate architectonics desires to go next. Thank you for your time, and we would now like to welcome any questions.
Yes, Brian, please go ahead.
Thanks. Can you pop up that cost slide for a minute? So you've got an exit cost from leaving the Philippines, and you've done quite the detailed level of costing here, down to like flowers and dinner. But are you sure? Can I ask you if would there be other costs incurred in that? Because I mean, if that's all that there is, I'm looking at this and I'm interpreting it as being, you're gonna fly to the Philippines, you go to a flower store, buy some flowers, have dinner, and then fly back the same day. So is that the intent, or are there other costs that aren't included in this?
Well, thank you for your question. We see as the cost of exiting the Philippine business from not being quantitative, but more qualitative in the aspect of your future relationship within that country. And I see your concern of seeming like a very low cost, but technically we have addressed the opportunity cost of not going forward with that, and going forward with Netherlands instead, which shows a higher revenue. I hope that answers your question.
Roderick, please go ahead.
Yeah, you guys in your analysis of the Netherlands actually already mentioned that the Netherlands is a bit of a saturated market. I believe that was one of your cons of doing business in the Netherlands. I'm just wondering why in the end you would suggest then going to the Netherlands to do business. If the other countries are close enough to meet our requirements, why not go somewhere where we have less local competition to worry about?
That's a fantastic question, and I will take that if everyone is good. We are an innovative and alive company, and we have consistently pushed the cutting edge. This is what the Netherlands embodies and what it loves. It desires to consistently incorporate our values and our type of architectural style into it. Yes, it may be saturated. Yes, it may be competitive, but there is nowhere on earth that desires more of what we have to offer.
Amanda, go ahead.
Just wondering, wanted to elaborate a little bit more. You guys talked a lot about the human advantage being the greatest asset. So you only mentioned Daniel. I'm just wondering if you guys gave any consideration to any other members of the team and where they would play a role in this this gathering, or sorry, this attempt to get on with the Netherlands.
So yes, other members of the team have been considered, and they were what brought us to the conclusion to go with not only the Netherlands, but also Ireland and also also Ireland and also sorry, my mistake. Also Ireland. We took a look at Philip O'Connor as a means of penetrating the Irish market, as well as Daniel penetrating the Dutch market.
Bridget, go ahead.
So as someone that actually deals with people from Amsterdam on a daily basis, I can tell you there are definitely some cultural differences between Canada and the Dutch, which was obvious. And how I didn't see anything in here about costs or any kind of process to make sure that the teams would be ready to deal with those cultural differences from a cost perspective in terms of training. How do you propose getting people ready to deal with the cultural differences that still do exist?
Thank you for that question. And when we consider that we are so fortunate to have Daniel on our team with that knowledge born into him and then provided to us, he will be the keys to the Dutch kingdom in a sense. That's why we are actually implementing phase 2 and phase 3 at a somewhat simultaneous timeline, so that we can consistently, as we bring Daniel to the Netherlands, we will bring the Netherlands to us through Daniel and his education throughout our small team prior to any dealings that he will initiate.
Okay, thank you so much, delegates and judges. That's about all the time that we have for questions right now. So delegates, you are free to leave the call right now.
Thank you.